Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the X Podcast. I'm pumped.
Woo, let's do it.
I'm so excited. It's a conversation in which we discuss all things: society, culture, spirituality, politics. Why not? Let's get into everything.
You really want to get into politics? I thought we're not supposed to mix.
At this point,
church and politics. Okay.
We would so appreciate if you could give us a like and a share, depending on where you're watching this and when you're watching this. And if you're listening to this via a podcast, make sure to subscribe and give us a review. It helps people find what we're doing here at the X Podcast. And if you're watching us live on Facebook, why don't you just hop into the chat? We love to converse with you live time. So why don't you do that? We're streaming in 2 different places, and we really want this to be a cool environment, a safe environment to have conversations about whatever comes to our minds. So I have 2 very special guests with me here today. And that's,
are we guests or co-hosts?
You guys are my friends. You guys are my brothers.
All right, we're friends.
You guys are the co-hosts to this wonderful show that we hope touches people.
Yeah.
So first we have Pastor Russ Moore in the house.
Hello.
It's good to have you, man.
We should call this Kevin and the Moores.
Do I have to switch my last name in order to be on this podcast?
Triple M. Yeah, I'm pumped. This is going to be fun. I think, we had started something back in quarantine, or PT15.
Yeah.
Which was just, conversations about how to grow in faith and life. And then the podcast itself had kicked off last year. And so I think for us, it's like, let's combine it all. Let's have a place where we can have fun, talk and discuss ideas, maybe even talk about things that people usually wouldn't talk about in church, and have some fun with it. Learn how to think.
Second with us is our fearless leader, Pastor Tim Moore. So how you doing, man?
I'm good.
Tell us about what you're excited about for the X Podcast.
I think, as you mentioned, PT15 was kind of a way during the quarantine for us to, me to really be able to, help encourage people during the week, to be able to have conversations, as you said. Just I try to bring real practical stuff, some spiritual stuff, biblical stuff. But I think what the idea where we began to talk about this, probably 2 months ago, was how do we create something that would enable us to speak to real life things and be able to dive into conversations. We get into, just so everybody knows that are watching this live or listening to it later, the 3 of us and some other ones here, we get into very lively conversations / debates all the time.
We did this morning.
Just over text. I don't know how many of them will show up at this table, but we get into a lot of lively conversation that we get done and we're like, I bet a lot of people would love to hear, not because of us, but it's the same kind of conversations they're around or the tensions they're in.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, how do we speak to those things so that people could get a perspective that maybe is different than what they're hearing through media, through social media, their circles. I'm not saying that we're different, but we might be. And a lot of us, even sit at this table, we have different perspectives on things. We have different perspectives on some stuff theologically. We have different perspectives on political stuff, cultural things that are going on right now. And so the idea for me was I wanted to have something where it's like, instead of just me preparing a mini 15-minute, 20-minute devotional, what does it look like for us to sit around the table and have, conversations and be able to, conversations where we can bring our faith into it, but they're conversations that I think are going to be real, real raw. Who knows what's going to be said. It's a little bit scary doing this live. At least with podcasts, we could edit out things that we go, I probably shouldn't have said that. But that may happen. So if you catch it live on Facebook, you might get the unedited version. It will be unedited. You catch it later and on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, it might be edited just a little bit. So don't hold anything against us, but we want this to kind of be just freewheeling. We'll have a concept, some different things. We want to engage with people. We want to engage with things that you have as a listener. Like, what are some questions you have about life, leadership, church, non-church, social, cultural, political, that kind of stuff.
If you're watching this, or If you're catching us at a later time, we actually have an email opened up. So we'd love to hear your ideas on different topics for different podcasts or episodes or whatever. Or if you have a disagreement with something that we say or a different perspective, we love the feedback. We're all about it. So send an email to podcast@thex.church. Again, that's podcast@thex.church. And we might even read your email on the air. Live time. So
let us know if you don't want it.
But
if you don't want it read on the air or your name.
Even
actually,
if you send hate,
if
we will read it.
Yes. Actually, I should say this.
Yeah, and hey, where they're writing in from.
Yeah. We want to know where you're writing in from.
Yeah.
I would say just include in any email if it's okay to say your name.
Yeah.
Because if you email in, we may use it regardless. So don't email us in and then go, but don't talk about this or don't mention me on the podcast, because that's not going to happen. It's fair game if you email us. I think we need to be able to stand behind what we have. If we have a disagreement, fine, have a disagreement, but stand behind it. I think that's part of the problem, not to get into conversation. I think it's part of the problem today in social media is that you can create, how many people have fake accounts that go on there and they slam someone from a distance and it's not them. They can hide behind an avatar. Like that to me is part of the problem today.
Right.
So disagreement's great. But
and speaking of taking a stand, one of the things that I know we were talking about before and we're really pumped about is you were actually going to announce on air like who you're voting for the presidential election.
Nice try.
Next. No.
So today we're going to talk about... We're excited about today's conversation, but that's a perfect segue, though, into
I'm voting for Kanye.
Today. There we go.
The birthday party.
Is he on the...
I think it's the birthday party. Is it?
No, I don't know.
I think it is.
Is this thing off the rails before you...
I don't know. Why did you say that? I am not going to say who I'm voting for.
Oh, okay.
I like what you said, though, PT, because it's hard to have a relationship with anybody right now and have a disagreement and remain friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what's cool, and you guys both alluded to it, is that even in our work context, if you're watching from outside of this X-Fam, and we're so glad you're here, but we have a lot of differences inside this building. There's a lot of differences of opinion. We all agree mostly on the things that are most important, but there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of discussion, and you're joking about it, but I literally woke up this morning to a text feud about some podcast from these two, and my phone is lighting up. It's 6 o'clock in the morning.
Who won? Was it?
I would have won if
one
I was
word.
in 1,000 away.
I just said one word, and I said what that word was.
But it's so hard to have a disagreement, and it's so hard to have meaningful discourse without being ending relationships or being canceled or all those things that we're seeing right now, or unfollowing. Or we've had people leave our church. I mean, people are willing to go to whatever extent in order to distance themselves from people who disagree with their opinion. And we reject that idea.
Right.
And I want to talk today about how we can disagree with each other without being disagreeable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How can we have healthy disagreements, because we have them at this table and we talk about them often, but we want to do it in a constructive way, not a destructive way. So I want to open up the floor maybe to Pastor Tim. You can start us off and just ask this question. We seem to struggle with different ideas, but why do we struggle so much with people who are different than us?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's pretty wide of a question. I think it is interesting when you think. I think there's a self-preservation a little bit in all of us that we want to preserve what we are, what we have. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, I think a lot of times the way we think is ideal, right? So I think. The way I think about politics, the way I think about culture, the way I think about God, the way I think about spirituality is the right way to think.
Right.
Plus I'm an Enneagram 3, so that lends more to me thinking that way.
3s are usually right.
Yeah, you're usually right. So, but it lends. So I think there's a level of self-preservation in us where I want to preserve what I feel is right. And I think sometimes that closes us off to other people with different ideas that come from different perspectives. I think one of the biggest thing I've seen in culture for the last couple decades, but more so I'd say in the last 5 years, is that we have stopped listening to other people and other ideas. And we can't even fathom that somebody else has a completely different perspective because of where they were born, how they were raised, what their parents believed. It really does affect, you know, where they went to school, what their experiences were like in school. They're so different. You know, it's like, I don't know how far I want to go in this, but just like my dad grew up in Baltimore, okay, in like inner city Maryland, inner city Baltimore, you know, and him and his family had experiences in school that it was just that kind of like would start shaping the way that they viewed life, you know, and it was hard. And he grew up poor. He grew up, you know, a lot of these things. And so those kind of things begin to shape your perspective. And I think the problem we have today is that we stop listening to other people's perspectives and literally think your perspective is not like mine, therefore yours is wrong. And because yours is, and it used to be that we used to be able to agree to disagree. Today it's if you don't think like I think and you don't have the same perspective that I have, then I'm done with you.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be around you. I don't know what's happened in our culture that we've got such a divide. I can see it. And I have family members now who are struggling in their friendships because of the whole political thing right now.
Yeah.
Like, they will not say anything, but their friends say a lot. And they do it to preserve the relationship. Their friends don't care.
Yeah.
And it's so much built around the political ideologies and different, like, how can you say that? And it's like we want to turn everybody. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know that answer that question.
No, I think that what's wild is that the way that so often we handle our differences with others is that we catapult our ideologies to the top, to the front. Like, there's almost an elitism right now that exists in culture. You have heard like about social media and all the algorithms and how it literally people are profiting off of creating echo chambers for our own ideas. So what you look at most on Facebook is what you see. You see people who agree with you. And for all of us, we're all creating our own groups of people that believe the same things. And it seems to be dangerous because I think we forget that everybody has a really valid perspective. That even in my own household, like my parents grew up in different settings. Some things were similar, some things were different. They grew up 30 miles apart, but their lives couldn't have been more different. And I think the second you stop having compassion for other people, you get into this really dangerous place. And we almost let that seep into every space, relationship, church, friendships. I mean, I've had arguments with my parents. I mean, it's amazing how destructive it can get when you catapult your own ideology to the forefront.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And what you said about friendships is so sad because of all the tragedies of 2020, when we talk about how polarizing the year is, the tension it's brought even into long-term friendships and relationships. And you said it, but I feel like I'm on like a samurai mission to try to destroy echo chambers. Right. Like, I just think, to me, that one of the things that just destroys our ability to be able to relate to other people and to not only mentally be able to stretch our mindsets, but also to have empathy. I think echo chambers just choke out empathy. And what happens is when you're in an echo chamber, whatever you hear, you not only believe all of it, but you believe all the counter arguments. Right. So the moment someone starts talking, instead of listening to hear, you're listening to respond, and you've already been preloaded with all of the reasons they're wrong. And I think the other part of it, you touched at it a little bit at the beginning, is I think one of the reasons it's so hard to disagree agreeably is because of our identity. It's identity politics. And there's this concept called idea ownership, where instead of me just saying, hey, this is an idea, and let's, like right now we're going to talk about ideas in this podcast. I think for this to work beautifully, we should be able to say, hey, here's an idea. I don't own this idea. So my ego is not going to be hurt if you attack this idea. This idea is not part of who I am. I'm a faith person. So for me, the goal is to say, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm secure. So I don't have an ownership on ideas. Therefore, I'm not defensive and touchy to say, hey, here's a concept. Let's just all talk about it.
Yeah. And I think we've lost the art of I heard another podcast say, that's one we like to listen to all the time. We've lost the art of attacking ideas without attacking the person. I think that's one of the things that we want to do. in this podcast and conversations that we have is there can be ideas that are presented that we can go after. This is why I really disagree with this policy. This is why I really disagree with this. To the point where it's like, I think it's okay for us to go, I think that's a stupid idea. I don't think you're stupid for suggesting it.
Right.
And I think I just think we've lost any kind of ability, and I think empathy is the word.
Yeah.
In our country, we've lost any kind of empathy, any kind of compassion.
Yeah.
And I think if anything, Jesus followers should lead the way with this type of behavior, because we should always see the person, not where they come from or their idea, or if we feel like it's wrong. Like I think about Robbie Zacharias that we lost in 2020, another great loss that we had in 2020, one of the most incredible theologians as well as apologists that we've had. But one of the things that made him so special, when he would go, he would go to universities and places where he would be debating with other ones, and people would come up. I remember them saying this, I think, at his funeral. People would come up to the microphone and say something with such visceral, like hate almost, and say something and then leave to just not to walk away. And Robbie would be like, no, come back, please come back, come back, please come back. Because he cared way more about that person than he did their comment.
Yeah.
He did not take it personally. He could see they're a child of God. Like that is someone that God created and they matter. And that to me is where we're a mess right now as a country.
So do you think a starting point to be able to have conversations where you disagree starts with the way you view humanity and to actually see people with respect? Because I think it's really easy, and especially with social media, especially if you're typing behind a keyboard, to dehumanize someone and to put the policy above the person.
Absolutely. I think this is why I say, as a Jesus follower, it should inform us, is because I should see intrinsic value in every single human. Imago Dei, right? Yeah. You are made in the image of God, and because of that, you matter. Yeah. And so if and that's why, just me speaking, very transparent, I don't get political on my social media platforms. Yeah. I made a decision a long time ago that I don't get political. There'll be some issues that I'll speak out on that I don't think are political, that we have made political.
Yeah, that's good.
That people have tried to make political. Yeah. But I don't speak into political issues and do all that. And I do it for a reason. I never want to lose the opportunity to be able to communicate with somebody the hope that I have received in Jesus and with anybody. And in the role that I'm in, I feel like it's that much more important. So I definitely don't in church. I don't on my own social media platforms, which are mine. I own them. I could do whatever I want, say whatever I want. I don't do that because I want the opportunity. Because I don't want to turn somebody away because they don't know my heart. Right. But they heard a phrase or they heard something or this without having an opportunity to, because I care about them as a person. Right. So that's my personal, not all pastors are like that. Yeah. That's fine. That's me personally. Yeah. I just feel like intrinsic value needs to take precedence. Like you said, the person over the policy or their ideas. And we need to get that way as a society to be civil.
I love it. I love the idea of I care more about you than being right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I care more about you as a person.
But we don't.
Right.
Let's be honest. I mean, that sounds great. Like, I agree.
I think that's a higher level of thinking. I want to jump into the chat a little bit just to let you guys know, because I have my computer in front of me. People are going wild about this sweatshirt. So here's the full view. I've worn it 2 days in a row.
Oh,
don't
wow.
tell anybody.
Smells bad.
So that's going to be dropping this weekend. So we have an online store you can get on right now at thex.church. And you can get
your
stuff.
Was that a plug?
That was
a little
bit.
bit.
Plug. Yes. What other merch we got coming?
We've got some really cool things: T-shirts,
long sleeve T-shirt.
We
don't want to talk about them yet, though.
Yeah,
no,
stop talking about it.
Yeah,
shut up,
Pastor Tim.
No, stop.
On this,
you're so season 2.
On this podcast, we're going to talk about things that we disagree about, for the most part.
There are things that you guys disagree with me about?
You guys disagree with me?
Are we allowed to disagree
that you disagreed with me?
Just kidding. But we're going to talk about a lot of things that we disagree about. And we just kind of want to establish maybe some ground rules before we keep going on these things. Before we, I don't know, maybe get on each other's nerves too much. I don't know. I don't want to hurt you guys' feelings. I don't want you guys to hurt my feelings. And what we know about each other is that we have done the work to have compassion towards each worldview. that we have. I know where you've come from, Pastor Tim. I know where you've come from, Pastor Russ. And we have compassion towards each other, but I want to maybe give the listeners a little look inside of each of our lives so that maybe they can have compassion towards us as well, because we are all imperfect human beings who are doing our best to navigate this life and this journey in a way that brings some purpose to the world. So why don't we start with you, Pastor Russ? Just give us a little glimpse into your upbringing and how you form your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was raised in the South. I was raised in Greenville, South Carolina.
Is that the dirty South or
that's
no?
the dirty South.
I don't know what the dirty South is.
I actually
hear
don't know what that
references.
means
I don't
either,
even know
yeah.
what it means. The dirty South.
So it's always a complex answer because, like all of us, there's a whole lot of things growing up that inform you. And I was a weird kid. I got into so many different hobbies and things, and they're laughing because they know. But grew up in the South, so probably important to know, incredible parents. Your typical kind of very conservative, Southern, conservative, politically conservative, theologically household, incredible parents. Any good attributes I have
we definitely
come from them.
hold on. I want to interrupt you for just a second, like Aaron. We definitely need to have a talk on what is theological conservatism.
I'll teach you later.
I would love for you to teach me that. I just think, go back. I
Yeah,
don't want to.
okay.
It's just triggered as like.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want to.
That's
Wait
true.
a minute. What does it mean to be theologically conservative?
That's good.
That sounds
Like
so
and
exciting.
versus
So
liberal
excited for that
theology. Like what is that?
I think I'm sick that Wednesday.
Sorry. Never mind. Move on.
All right.
Go ahead.
Anyway,
Maybe that's just me.
anyway.
That's episode 19.
Anyway, Greenville.
So
we at?
grew up in the South, very conservative kind of upbringing, but several things. I think one, growing up, that shifted as I grew up because just like everybody, like I would say like most people when you grow older, you start getting out on your own, thinking for yourself. I moved around a little bit, traveled a little bit. It's impossible to do that without the different places that you move to and the different groups of people you're around beginning to inform your worldview. I do have a natural devil's advocate in me. So getting into my early 20s to mid 20s, a lot of my thought processes began to change. A lot of the things that I looked at, and I think for most people, not all people, but maybe for most people, as you grow older, all the things that are very black and white and binary, you begin to see a more of a nuanced way. And so I lived for the first half of my life in Greenville, but I lived overseas for about a year. I lived in Lexington, Kentucky for 5 years. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia
That's
for 5
pretty much
years.
overseas.
That's pretty much overseas.
Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington, Kentucky, yeah. And then Atlanta, and then here for about 2 years now. So, it's impossible. All of us like to think, oh, well, I only think independent. But, based on the books you read, based on the places you visit, based on the people you get to know, all that informs. And so probably everybody would say this about themselves. I'd like to think I'm pretty open-minded. I know we're not allowed to get political. I'll just say I feel pretty politically homeless. And so I don't know anything else. I could go on all day,
No,
but
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Pastor Tim, why don't you give us a little...
So I actually, interestingly enough, because I was thinking about how my childhood affects me. I feel like I grew up in a bubble until 10th grade.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
I feel like I grew up in a bubble. It was, my parents were pastors of a smaller church, local here in Columbus, Whitehall. And so from what I can really remember of, being here, I grew up in Columbus area mostly. I was literally by Whitehall in the 80s. And so spent all that time in a small church. Even my perspective of church was in a bubble. Like that was all I knew.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, those of you that are a little bit older are going to remember, this is pre-internet. This is pre-social media. This is pre all that stuff. So you literally could live in a bubble. You only way you got news was what was on TV or came in a newspaper. And so, you literally did feel like you grew up in a bubble. And so small church.
What news?
What do you mean what news?
What news was on as you growing up?
I don't think we had the different news stations. It was 4, 6, 10 here. It was local. We did not have cable TV.
Oh, okay.
We did not have cable TV. So it's whatever the rabbit ears gave us. That's what we had for TV.
Back in horse and buggy.
Yes,
times.
yes, horse and buggy times. And so we And so I did that. And then when 10th grade came to my freshman and sophomore year, we moved to Germany. And that was kind of, I think, really where perspective began to shift and change. We were at the military. So that gave me a whole new perspective and appreciation for military life. Lived 3 years in Germany at a military base. We lived off base, but most of our life was spent on base and in a military environment. And so again, even that was at the beginning of, what was the first? Was it Operation Desert Storm? That was the first one, right? That happened in Iraq. And so that all happened while we were over there. So we saw like a war starting and people being deployed from our base over there, people we knew being deployed. And so I feel like that opened up. Why? Because I traveled and I saw every part of Europe. I think I've been to some 17 or 18 different countries around the world. And so I kind of just opened this door to traveling, seeing different things and different perspectives.
How much do you think that affects the way you view the world?
Oh, it does. I think it affects a lot of things. The more, because when I was living overseas, your perspective of America becomes very different. Even as an American, like what's going on feels like news, not you're in it.
Right.
And but here's what I guess one point I can make about being different. When you're in, so I went to a new bubble. It was a military bubble for 3 years, and every decision that's made politically, everything affects you differently. It affects how that's affected being stationed abroad and all these things. And so you begin to kind of see things differently because of that. It's just how it impacts you. And it's just traveling. I've been to Russia. I've been to every country in Europe. I've been, Central America. I've been to Canada.
How did you eat in those countries?
Oh, it was hard. In my favorite meal in Russia was,
you're a picky eater,
was Pizza Hut. We found a Pizza Hut. It was a little bit different, but in Moscow, there was a Pizza Hut. It was awesome.
Sorry, I keep taking it. But
no, that was the best. That was the best. That was the best.
A lot about America.
The food in Europe
Pizza
is
Hut.
awesome. The food in Europe
how
is
can
great.
you say that? You ate Pizza Hut?
Not in Europe.
Oh, okay.
No, the food in Europe was great. Germany has great food. Italy, decent food. They don't make pizza as well as we do. Trust me.
Unless you're in Rome.
Huh?
Unless you're in Rome.
I went to Rome. I don't think their pizza is as good as ours. I'm sorry. Italian pizza is so different than American pizza.
Listen,
American pizza
here's
is
what
real
you need to
pizza.
know.
Italian pizza, is that what you?
Here's what you need to know.
You've
about
been to Rome.
Tim
Yeah.
Moore.
I've
been
been
to
to
Rome.
All
It's
three of
hard.
us have been to
Listen,
Rome. Where
the
else have
problem
all
is-
three of us been to?
Hey, I want to share my story.
Oh, gosh. Sorry. Anyways, so that's it.
So you're in Germany eating Pizza Hut, and then you were like,
I was in Russia eating Pizza Hut.
okay, and then that led you to you're going to vote for.
Yeah. Anyway, so
New merch drops this week.
merch dropping. Yeah. So, anyways,
man,
and
we
then
got-
came back, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, and we're glad that you're back.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad to be here.
Welcome back.
That's
so
been a while, guys. It was 1993. So
1993. That's cool. Speaking of 1993, I was born in 95, just to get that out.
Wow.
I feel so old.
When did you
I
guys-
got married in 1996.
Yes. I am the residential youth on this panel, and so I'm going to represent all my young people. I grew up locally here where our church is right just outside Columbus, Ohio, Canal Winchester. I'm born and raised. My whole family's kind of planted around here. I grew up Catholic, cradle Catholic, thankful for a lot of things that taught me and is a huge part of my story. But politically, very conservative upbringing. I mean, as conservative gets. But always, I was that kid who watched every news station, who welcomed the debate. I think debating for me is, I think, my favorite sport. So
You're an Enneagram 8.
Enneagram 8.
That's why.
We'll talk more about that Enneagram later. But why don't you put in the chat or send us an email what your Enneagram number is, because if you're an 8, you're going to love
We
listening.
enjoy Enneagram here on staff.
Yeah, Enneagram is something we
tool.
love. Huge tool to help us have compassion towards people.
Yeah.
But I grew up in that setting, but went off to college and was a political science major for a little bit. It really just care deeply about being open-minded and talking through every idea. I think that the biggest journey of my young adulthood, emphasize young, I'm just kidding, it is really discovering where I might be wrong,
Right.
where the things I've experienced may not be correct, or just maybe, we all have these almost elitist mindsets, I think, about some things that we think that the way we've already talked about it, but the way that we think is the premier, is the only way to think. And for me, I think God's been working on my heart and telling me where I'm wrong and trying to just gain different perspectives from different people.
Yeah.
And so I think that the theme of these podcasts will be super helpful, even just to me, in order to, how can we sit here and deconstruct ideas in order to construct just a thought process and a way of thinking that will be helpful to all of us. So,
yeah. There's they make fun of me because I love quotes, but G.K. Chesterton, some people say he was one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century. He said, it's not arrogant to think that you're right. He said, it's arrogant to not be able to possibly conceive how you might be wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And good. I think that's where everything's on the table here. And I know you're going to push.
Let's talk about, because we've mentioned a few times Enneagram on here, and you'll see it. We'll talk about it in sermons. We'll talk about it. We'll do social media posts about it. But we love it around here because it's a huge tool.
Yeah.
And I think that before you ever engage in a disagreement with somebody, you better do your homework on that person to understand their life experience and their tendencies and their predictabilities to consider.
Well, that would be the compassionate thing to do.
Right.
Right.
And if you are arguing for the sake of unity, then you'll have compassion, hopefully. But
and you'll never win an argument if you're not thinking about that person,
right,
and trying to win their heart.
That's why I actually sometimes get confused when people start to argue, and I'm thinking, why are you engaging in this argument and then ending your friendship? Why don't you just end your friendship and you save some stress on the front end? I don't get it, but that's not what we do here. We try our best to have compassion and empathy towards each other. And so the Enneagram is a huge personality typing tool. There's 9 types, and they give you a really low resolution picture on
that's a good way to put it.
On our motives. Our motives. So not just our tendencies, but really where are you coming from when you say that? Where, what are you bringing to the table, and what's behind the things that you're saying? And so, like I said, there's 9 types. I'm an 8, and these 2 are 3s.
I'm
so
a 10.
Please pray for me.
I'm a 10.
But let's talk a little. Put your Enneagram number in the chat.
Numbers, like
yes, I agree.
It's like 3 days later.
You're in trouble.
So tell us just maybe about your brief Enneagram journey, and maybe that can help our listeners have some more compassion.
I started by reading The Road Back to You, and it was very insightful. One of the things I like about Enneagram over other tools, personality type tools, because I was big into Myers-Briggs before that, but what I liked about it is it does speak to motive, and it speaks about health and unhealth. And there's no other tools that do that. And I think sometimes the other tools become a crutch where it's like, well, I'm just a ENT this, or I'm just a this, so that's who I am, take it or leave it. Whereas I think Enneagram was one of the first tools that I'd seen that said, this is what it looks like to be a healthy 3. This is what it looks like when you're unhealthy. Right. And I think that's so helpful, not just for me, but interacting and knowing other people's what it means to be a healthy 8 and what it means to be an unhealthy 8, because it helps me as a leader, it helps me other, because I can identify things that if they come up, you can identify and go, okay, I know what's probably the core motive of that person, or that's a healthy core motive. This response is unhealthy.
Yeah. Right.
And I could speak to that and go, is that really what you want? You know what I mean? If you're a 2 or you're a 4 or 6. And so I think that's where it's helpful. I feel like it helps me understand people better.
Yeah.
When did you find out you were a 3? What was the phrase you read or what you picked up on? You're like, ooh.
It was a little bit of a struggle, and I did a bunch of the list that he has of all the different. So I had to go through each one of them and kind of go, is this one me? Is this one me? Is this one me? And it became more and more clear.
By the way,
all my tests came out as 3.
Super resistant when I told you about the Enneagram.
Yeah.
He was late to the party, and you would not believe the hate I got from him.
He just took it yesterday.
I know.
Yeah. This was a year and a half ago we're talking about now.
Right.
Maybe 2 years ago.
So how did you know? How did you know you were a 3?
So the test I took came out as 3, but really I didn't go by that. I went by, like, with that book on each one, it had all of these things, like, here's how you would think. And I actually kind of wrestled between like a couple different ones. But when it came back to 3, it was hard because there were certain things that they would say in the motive of image that I struggled with. Because I was like, because image.
You didn't want the image of having to struggle with image.
Yeah, no, threes are very image conscious, but
Yeah.
it looked different in my life, and I think it's challenging because I think the really hard part about any personality type tool or even Enneagram is to peel away who you are at work and who you are as a leader and who you've had to be and who you know, to kind of find out who you like really are and where it's like honest. And so I was really struggling because there was parts of it I go, oh, that's not me. I don't do that. But then when I understood the core motive a little bit more, I went, okay, now I see why I do that. And it's not for the real superficial things of image, but it's other things.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't know. I don't know if it was a huge epiphany. It was just it narrowed down, and then I even took some tests, and they came out the same thing. So I kind of and I identify most of what's being said, posted with threes.
I'm going to give you a little more time to think about it while Russ goes. But I want to know, what was the first thing you felt like you had to work on after you found out you were a 3? We'll come back to you.
Yeah, I took mine. It was probably about 12 years ago.
Russ also a 3.
I thought it was about right after the monks developed it.
Yeah, I helped them, but it's no, probably 3 or 4 years ago. Honestly, I was going through kind of just a time in my life of healing through some stuff and trying to do just some self work, to be honest. And there's this whole quote by this old ancient philosopher, St. Augustine, that said, in a faith journey, to know God, you have to know yourself. And it's just, and I've seen it in others, and I started seeing it myself. It can be really easy to go through all these practices and religious stuff, but if you didn't know what made you tick, if you didn't know what created your wounds, if you didn't know, there's just self-awareness, I think, so crucial to health and to being a well-rounded human being. And so, like, for me, I was going through all these books and self-discovery, and then someone handed me The Road Back to You, and I was like, I don't know. I think this is like 2017 or something. They're like, just read chapter 3, which I think was on threes, because they just knew. I guess my life just screamed that I'm a 3. And I don't think I'm a super emotional person, but I wept. I read this chapter.
That didn't happen with me.
I know that didn't happen with you. You didn't even cry as a baby. You laughed. So, but I read it and I was like, I feel understood. You know, like when you finally read it, and then about last year, I was telling Pastor Kevin I went through like an identity crisis because I'm also high on 7, I'm high on 8, and Pastor Kevin says also 4, but anyways, for me, it was powerful for a lot of reasons. We need to do a whole episode on it. Yeah. But number one, to understand myself. It doesn't matter all the different practices I go through, whatever your faith journey is, if I don't understand how I'm wired. And so for me, it was so helpful to understand myself. But then, yeah, like you've said, for compassion for others, to understand where others are coming from, that's another tool to help build empathy. Yeah. You can't love people well if you don't seek to understand people well. And I'll just give an 8 story, and you can tell me if this makes sense. I, last year, went to like a conference for work in Southern California, and I stayed for part of the time with some friends of mine that are now church planners in Long Beach. And the husband, he is, an 8 if there was ever an 8. And we have very different views, politically, theologically. And I knew he kept trying to, like, test me out. But I remember the whole time I'm there, I'm like, I'm only here for a week. I don't want any tension. I don't want any whatever. So I just avoided it. I would never go there. Even though I'm devil's advocate, I love to debate. I love to argue. I just never went there. I would change. And I left. And when I left and actually had time to think about it on the plane ride home, I actually thought to myself, I actually didn't love well in that friendship relationship because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's an 8. That's actually a bonding thing for 8s, that they enjoy that. And by me kind of just tapping out and not engaging, because I thought because the way I'm wired, I'm like, I'll just not rough the waters. Yeah. But it actually would have meant more to him, and I actually felt like he was disappointed. You
were trying to protect the friendship.
I think that, but if you're listening, many of you may not know a ton about the Enneagram, and so don't get too caught up in the numbers. What we really want you to see is the process of what it looks like to care about the motive of the other person, and what it looks like to be honest about yours.
Yeah.
Because I think the mistake is when you go through life thinking that your normal is everybody's normal.
Right.
Yep.
And that everybody must be feeling exactly what I'm feeling. And if you think that way, then you 9 times out of 10 are going to be really disappointed in who you're talking to,
right,
and where people are coming from. And compassion in life is understanding, just using the Enneagram as an example, that there are 9 normals.
Yeah,
your normal is not the only normal.
Yeah.
people have
It's hard to imagine.
Or the best normal.
Yeah.
It is hard to imagine.
And what's interesting is you guys are both threes, and you guys are very different.
Yeah.
Just because you have it's not a label over your life. It's a tool to help you unpack your life so far and how you can be healthy and how you can understand, oh, I might be drifting into an unhealthy lane. You know those new things on the cars, on the window or on the mirrors, where you have the lane detection, and if you're drifting out, beep, 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 bring you back in. That's what the Enneagram can be, is you understanding when you're drifting into a healthy or unhealthy space, because you may not be responsible for the people around you, but you are responsible for yourself, and you are responsible for your own health. And if you're just out there wreaking havoc on the world because you are unhealthy, because you haven't done the work to sit down, and I'm speaking to myself here, because you haven't done the work to sit down and look at where your life has, where you're disappointed. You know, the things that emotionally have happened to you that you haven't unpacked yet. Because if it doesn't come out in a healthy way, it's going to come out of your ears, and it's going to come out passive aggressively, and it's going to wreak havoc on your environment and your friendship. So don't get caught up on the numbers. I hope that was encouraging.
Yeah, no, and it may help because that's a great point. People may have never even know what the heck we're talking about, the Enneagram. And so I mentioned 8. Did you mention what is an 8 in a nutshell?
So I had a similar experience, Pastor Russ, than you. I saw people ranting and raving about this book. It's called The Road Back to You. I think it's in the chat here somewhere. The Road Back to You. It's a short read. It's an easy read because I read it. Yep. It's written by Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile, and it is my most recommended book to the people around me because for me it was so eye-opening. It was, like you said, Pastor Russ, it can be emotional for someone to read your mail, you know, for someone just by describing a type. They've never met you. They don't know where you come from, but they have they've given you language for so many of the things that you felt.
That's a great way
intrinsically.
to put it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for me, the 8 it's called the
Challenger.
the contrarian, the challenger.
Challenger is what I've heard.
Known for giving love and receiving love, and you probably, if you're listening, you probably have all met someone or have someone in your life like this who receives love and gives love through conflict. And so I can be really confrontational. You can say something to me, and I might just give you crap back because it's fun for me, honestly, and I just like to do it. And it doesn't mean I hate you, and it might even be a great idea. But if you said it, I feel like you should be able to back it up, and let's debate. Let's have a, let's connect over yelling at each other. So
Do you ever feel misunderstood because of that?
very much so, very much so. So
Do you ever feel like everybody hates you because of that?
well, the problem is that you can really hurt people if you're not aware of how aggressive you come off. And so they say 8s have the most energy on the Enneagram. I have a lot of intensity. And so when I feel like I'm mid-level intensity, others can just be knocked off of their heels, and be on their faces and in their pool of tears because of what I said to them. And I understand that. So self-awareness for me has been growing in that. But I knew I was an 8 when in the book they talked about 8s oftentimes feel like they've lost their innocence too soon. And so had to grow up really soon, had to be strong, and had to put on a strong front in order to survive in the world. And so for me, that was the point where I knew it was like that. But we can talk more about our stories in another episode. But for me, we had a lot of tragedy in my family when I was around 10 years old. I had an uncle who died of cancer tragically when he was 42, and 8 months later, his son, my cousin, got hit by a car at 13 and died on impact. And so my journey has been a lot of how can I watched a lot of people grieve while I was grieving. And so there was a lot more people in my mind who had a lot more license to grieve than I did. We had people who were in the immediate family of those two, people who who that was their brother and that was I felt like other people had more license to grieve than I did. Does that make sense? And so what I needed to do was be strong for the family, be strong for my own sake, because that was just how I coped. And so I'm still unpacking that as we go, but I think that what has been helpful about this tool for me is that it's taken me to those places in my life. Those, because how can, and we all have things like that, maybe not as intense, maybe a little bit different. Maybe you lived a different life than I lived, but how do we put language to the things that are unfortunate that happen in our lives that make us who we are, you know? And so often in my life, I've walked around with those things oozing from me, maybe subliminally. It's not like you can look at it and say that's what it is, but I want to find out what that means for me, and what growth looks like for me, and what health looks like for me. And I want those things in my life to bring me purpose and not to bring other people pain.
What do you think the world would look like if half the population did internal work like that?
Yeah.
To say, I want to be healthy and integrated and whole. And I think both of you have spoken to it, but I think the power, the word, if there's one word for what the Enneagram does, is it brings awareness.
Yes.
Well,
Like I know, yes, self-awareness, but then also like I know when I'm unhealthy now.
Yeah.
As a 3, I can tell a 3's biggest desire is to be admired.
Yep.
And so you can hate me, disagree with me, but if I feel like you don't admire me, then if I'm in an unhealthy place where I'm not secure, like the knee-jerk reaction, like you said, is a great word. It oozes the unhealth, the oozing, the striving for validation.
I think the point of this tool and why we even bring it up today, just to go back to that, as we talked about our stories and our Enneagram numbers, is to highlight how different we all are. And I think, you know, we talked about license to be different. There's something really, really important for us to recognize about those differences. And I love that whether it's different personality types or Enneagram numbers, it highlights the creativity and the uniqueness by which God made each of us. We are wired differently, and we see things differently. And if we don't have an appropriate self-awareness, that's where we go to that self-preservation or I'm right or echo chambers or whatever else, which puts us at odds with somebody else that has a different idea, that comes from a different place, a different perspective. And I think that's where we struggle with compassion. We struggle with empathy. We struggle with being able to see the person. And so I think all of this, the conversation was really about the fact that we're different. And to try to conform everybody around us
It's exhausting.
to who we are. Not only is it exhausting, but I think it's offensive to God.
Yeah.
Like, can we just recognize how offensive it is to a creator who goes, yeah, but I wanted a 3 here and a 4 here and a 7 here, and I made them this, and they're an extrovert, they're an introvert, and they're, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's offensive to God when we think the whole world should look like us and think like us. Like, I think we need to recognize that as Jesus followers. That's significant to me. And one of the most unique things about being different, and part of this journey, and I think self-awareness is something, I think it's so cool that you, Kevin, embrace this, not only the Enneagram, and we're bringing that, one of the first ones talking about it in our staff, but I think it's so important to have a great awareness of how different everybody is around us and how God made us different. So it kind of, before that, I had started on a little bit of a journey, and I don't know if it's just you get older. I don't know. What I was going to say is that the fact that you're younger and you're becoming self-aware is great. I don't think I started becoming really self-aware until probably way later. And, you know, I think I would have lived in that bubble, and so I think it was really more probably into my 30s, late 30s, before I'm starting to go, you know, and I think it's a very elitist thing. It's awful. It really is. And one of the books I read years ago, I was trying to look it up. I think it's called Sacred Pathways. Gary, I can't remember.
Chapman.
No, it's not. I think the author's name is Gary something, but it's Sacred Pathways. And in that, he talks about, I can't remember if it was 9 different ways. I don't think it lines up with the Enneagram, but it was 9 different ways that we connect with God. And one of the things that he talked about, spirituality, and this was eye-opening for me as a pastor, a preacher, was that we're all very different in the way we connect with God. He talked about, like, I remember one that stuck with me because it's a way that I connect with God is intellectual. So he said there's one of them was like an outdoor naturalist. Like, they've got to go, and if they're outdoors and they love to be outdoors, but there's something about that helps them literally in their way they are wired, they feel more connected to God in the outdoors, taking a walk and hike and thinking about Him and being in that environment. Some were solitude, like they needed to be into quiet, whatever. And you have a couple different ways that you connect with God. I think the book isn't like ultra exciting of a book to read, but I think it's really, it helped me a lot to realize that one of my ways was being an intellectual.
Yeah.
And so as an intellectual, one of the ways that I feel connected with God is I think this comes through in my sermon prep, is I'm studying the Bible or reading something that is an ideal or a revelation of God that He's given me. I feel really connected as I dwell and I think on those things. And the highlight of the whole thing is he was like, people come and they begin a journey of faith, and then we go, here's your model for grow. Go read this at home in a closet for 15 minutes. Go do this, and not everybody's the same, and not everybody's going to connect with God the same. And so when you understand that, okay, that kind of helped me. It's like, okay, even in worship or we do at church, I don't want to talk too much about what we do at church, but preaching this, that, I need to realize not everybody's going to receive this message the same way.
Right.
And certain things are going to really speak to somebody, and certain things are going to probably not connect with other people as well. Or in the atmosphere of church may not be the way people have their most intimate moments with God,
Yeah.
but it might be alone. And so I just think it's all it did for me was help me highlight we're different. We should have a license to be different because God made us different, and that's not bad.
I think if you watched any of the news, and we're going to wrap up here in a second, but if you've watched the news and you've watched the discourse of society, I have, especially over this year, I just want to be different.
Yeah.
And I see so many people who feel like they have to conform to a certain mindset. They have to conform to a certain way of life, and that the only way to exist is to engage in that crap. And it's not.
Right.
There's another way. There's another path. And I don't know.
But would you say, I want to speak to that, would you say, though, one of the things I've seen that makes it hard to be unique right now is there's such a pressure from culture to think a certain way. If not, you're going to be canceled.
Oh, yeah.
If not, then you're labeled as this or this or this, even if you have an idea and it's not from there.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting harder today in our culture to go, I want to hold on to this view. I'm not talking about something that is going to put somebody else down or off, but it's hard, I think, to be unique in a culture where it's like everybody needs to think the same way.
I don't know if it's just the past few months, but right now, people are looking at the people that surround them, and they're saying, are you a racist or are you a socialist?
Yeah.
And I think I don't want my life to result in that low of a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that I hope the goal of this podcast, and if you're listening, is for us to raise the bar a little bit and go, how can I've seen the outcome of people who live this way, look at life this way, and I want to be different.
Yeah.
And in order to experience a different outcome, you have to do something different.
Right.
And so I've seen people live their entire lives without looking inside and without considering their own motives, without thinking about those things that have hurt them and wounded them so deeply and formed them into who they are and their celebrations and their successes and their failures and their upbringing and their socioeconomic status. We carry that with us. And so if you want to live a different life, and you have to be willing to dive into those deep, dark places that others aren't willing to go to. Yeah. And so we want...
Is that where we're going with this podcast?
I just think, let's go to the deep, dark places.
Is this becoming counseling? I didn't even know.
It's counseling for me. I don't know. I think that our biggest hope is that if you're part of a community, that they're giving you the license to be different.
Yeah.
That it is not black and white. It's not red or blue. It's not here or there, that we are all different, and God made us different, and you're allowed to be different. So let's try it.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think, because I know we talked about a few different things, I think it all connects in this, that if we're going to be different, there's the internal work, and then there's the external bridges. So let's just get really practical. If we're going to, because I just so agree. I think echo chamber thinking is such low-level thinking.
Yeah.
So if we want to think at a higher level, if we want to have gracious conversations, intelligent conversations, nuanced conversations, we've got to start taking active steps. We've got to have what this conversation is. Hopefully this spurs on a ton of other conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
Where people can get around people that they disagree with. They would tend to think, oh yeah, they're one of them.
Yeah.
So they're racist, or they're socialist, or I can tell who they're voting for, or I can tell by the fact they wear whatever.
They wear a mask.
They wear a mask or don't wear a mask.
Gosh.
And if we're going to just destroy the polarization, I think there's got to be intentional conversations. And without getting political, let me just kind of say this. I had a conversation with one of my family members, and who is very passionate in a certain way of thinking. And they said, and I said, well, what if you just for a month destroyed your echo chamber, all the articles, the things that you usually read, listen to, and just listen to this side for a month? I said, it'll still be there when you get back, but the result is your mind might be stretched. You might at least understand the other side. And their response was, but Russ, I don't know what media I can trust. And so here's the thought I had. I just said it, and as I said it, I was like, I believe this. Diversification is always the safest way to ensure your investments, right? You're going through the Dave Ramsey thing right now, financial. He would tell you when you invest, diversify your investments. I'm curious your thoughts. This is what I told this person. I said, what if, first off, don't be on the news all day. Don't make that your thing. But when you are getting news, I'm not saying this is right. What I do is I hit Apple News, and what pops up is far right to conservative to moderate to centrist to moderate left to far left. And I just take it all in. And I said, if you're scared that you can't trust the news, wouldn't it be even more dangerous to only consume one source?
Yes.
And so I'm just talking, I'm just talking out loud. What practically can we do to stretch our minds, stretch our perspectives, so that we don't end up in our own echo chamber that just tells us we're right? And we do learn to think at a different level.
Yeah, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense when you're talking about just consuming from the news. I think where we can get to, what do we do with that? And I think the best thing that we can do with that is to engage in higher level critical thinking conversations with people who might think differently.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I think that's like one level, because that's just, all it is you're just getting fed information. And we have no idea how, because we all know at this table, like, you can spin any number. You can spin anything, for whatever narrative that you want to create. And that's all across the board. I get that. I think where we get to real life is when we start having a conversation with somebody that's maybe different. And thinks differently, believes something differently, and listen.
And approach it to listen.
Approach it to listen. So, like, I want to know, I think it's not even that, not even the belief or the concept, but why do you believe that?
Yes.
Like, I feel like we don't go far enough in our conversations. It's always like, well, I'm pro this, or I'm anti this, and all that. Unpack that.
Yeah.
Why are you for that? What is it? Because there's often a fear, or I think almost all the stuff we believe in politics and everything fear is behind everything. Even if it's, I'm afraid that the economy's not going to be what I need it to be if this person's in office. I'm afraid we're going to lose this right if this person gets in office. I'm afraid that this is going to, everything is almost fear-based. Yeah. And so it's like, why is somebody for something, against something? It was an experience that led to a fear. Was it something someone told them that led to a fear? Right. What is it? And I just think we have to be, and it's hard because people don't want to have conversation without it becoming identity-based and getting angry, and I'm going to unfollow, and I'm going to disconnect, and I'm not, like you said, how many people have left the church? It's not mine. I've had conversations with pastors all over who have been crushed over people who were close to them or part of their churches that left during the pandemic without ever connecting, without having face-to-face conversations over things, because everything's turned political this year. Right. And in conversations. And
you'll hear what you want to hear.
And you'll hear what you want to hear because you got echo chambers, and then this person says this. And you could, as a pastor, you could just literally say, here's what the Bible says on this, here's what we're going to believe, and it doesn't matter. I'm ticked off this and leave. And it's like, we don't even have a conversation. And it's like, how have we gotten to this place as a society? We need to, it's okay to disagree. Let's not be disagreeable. Let's not be that person.
One conversation this week, not to give us all homework. What if that one person we would disagree with most, we just sat down. I got no agenda. I'm not thinking for how I can respond back, but.
Did we start ours this morning already?
We did.
On text conversation?
We did.
We started ours already.
Do we want to tell everybody what we disagreed on?
No, we'll move on. I don't know that we want to get into that kind of stuff just yet. Let's just wait.
The only thing I saw
work our
was
way in a little bit. People aren't ready for that.
orders. So that's all we'll say. But I don't know. This conversation has helped me, and I think that so much in life we all wish that somebody would take the time and would love us enough to walk a mile in our shoes.
Yeah.
And so maybe,
Cool.
like you said, a great way to lead this is walk a mile in someone's shoes.
Yeah.
Because you wish someone would walk a mile in yours.
Yeah.
And so do some work, go text somebody right now, or reach out to them, or share this podcast with them and talk about it. Use us as a tool to start a conversation, a healthy conversation with somebody that you love, somebody that maybe a relationship has been strained with. And I don't know, I just can't get over how much I love you both, and I'm just thankful for your opinion, and
love you
and
too.
who you are.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Let's do this again.
Let's do this again next week. I think it'll be great.
That'd be awesome.
And that's all for today, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, we love feedback, and we love to hear your ideas for topics and what you want maybe for us to discuss. So email podcast@thex.church. Make sure to like this, subscribe to our podcast. Just search the X Podcast. It should show right up on whatever platform you listen to. Share this with your friends and family. Share it on social. We're going to make this a weekly thing. Sound good?
Do it. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great week.